All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. If you see me look off to the side, it's because we're still letting some folks in. Um, but thanks for coming tonight. It's going to be a really cool conversation and one that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Being a person that has been in the hiring sector for 10 years or so, this is a topic that I have tried to learn about, and especially over the last couple of years, really kind of um, didn't really know how. And I admit that knowing what to do, how to create this stuff, and talk about some of the really tough issues that are out there, and understanding what we can all do to help everybody else and help people of color and anybody that has a diverse background get into tech because as we know it is primarily based around the same demographic that it has been forever, and it's something that we want to change, and we want to figure out the best ways to do that. So this is something we can all advocate for. It's something that I am very passionate about, and being a kind of social justice warrior on this, and joining all my friends and brothers and sisters to go out there and really help out and do something. So I wanted to bring this topic up, and go after it. Like I said, there's going to be some tough things that you're going to hear today, and that's okay. It's something that we all need to hear, and things that we need to do. And if you have questions, the one thing that I can tell you is that Nathan is a guy that will answer all your questions, even the hard ones. And that's one reason I'm having him talk. He is. I've known Nathan only now for maybe I don't even know if it's been a year, honestly. Maybe a year, maybe. Yeah. So Nathan is he runs his own company, and he's in tech and comes from the nonprofit world and helping folks out, and then turned a lot of his passions into tech and marketing and building websites and really giving back to the community. He is involved all over the place and has been so for quite some time. And so when I first met Nathan, I was talking to him about some of the things that I've gone through and things that I've done, and it was just kind of an instant connection of friendship. We share a ton of things in common, a passion for helping people and doing the right thing, and then tech brought that into it as well, and not only just on the job scene, but realistically, he's a veteran, and so he understands what it's like to go through it, be a vet, and then also be a person of color in this space that is dominated by white males, and that's it's okay. And but so he's gone through it. He's very successful, runs his own business, and I wanted to kind of pick his brain in front of the group of what we can do to help, and how we can advocate for people that are not in a power position right now, that we're trying to make everybody aware of issues going on, what we can do. And so Nathan is a teacher, he's a mentor, he is a veteran, he is um, gosh, he does so many things for so many people. I can't tell you since the last 6 to 8 months how many people I've just sent his way, and he's never turned any of them out. I've sent him tons of people, and they all come back the same. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that you had me talk to Nathan, because I've learned so much, and there's so many opportunities." And so don't want to take up too much time. I want to get on this, but I do thank you for coming in and joining us tonight at 6 o'clock on a Monday for Get Hired Cascade Talks. We've just really been growing this group digitally, and we'll kind of talk about this later. But without further ado, I want to welcome Nathan Webster to Get Hired Cascade Talks. And Nathan, take it away, buddy.
Thanks. I didn't need that big introduction. I'm just like everyone else here on the line. I appreciate you having me, Max. It's an honor. It's a privilege. Like you said, when we met, like almost a year ago, I kind of want to say, not quite sure. It was just immediate. I felt, especially seeing your, I guess, feed come through on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, Max, why do I keep hearing that guy? Why I keep seeing his face? And then that smile, that $1 million smile, the bank account hasn't caught up just yet.
One day.
I got to meet that guy. So it's been a pleasure and honor to meet you. I'm just happy to serve. So any way we can chop it up to help, either talk about fears, anything, I'm game.
Cool. So the first question I wanted to ask you, as a person of color, how do we, I mean, let's just go after it. What has been the biggest challenge that you've seen being a person of color in the tech space?
Well, for those that don't know, I am originally from the Pacific Northwest, so I'm used to being the ink spot in a bowl of milk. But as we go in tech, as we know, we have our own culture, we have our own language, and it doesn't help that we're not very social. So it makes it a little bit difficult to speak a vernacular that's not native to you, and you don't know. There's no social cues, there's no physical language, body language. You're like, so it doesn't feel very warm or welcoming, especially for the women that get into this field. So I think sometimes it just feels very isolating, to believe that, okay, I do believe. And, you have that imposter syndrome. Like, dude, I mean, I can do the work. I can't, but can I? No one's telling me like, hey, good, great code, or like, hey, this giving you a pat on the back. You just kind of go on and keep churning away. And I think that's probably one of the most difficult pieces to it, is that being that it's not innately very social, or like, hey, give someone a pat on the rear end. We don't have that culture to where you are doing a good job. So that means like, okay, is this a field I'm going to stay into? Am I going to look for other opportunities? Am I going to do like a lateral move at a different company? You kind of just really think like, is this even though you might think you're good at it, you just like think it might not be for you. So there's all types of thoughts and even self or negative self-talk that you have. So that is some of the experience that I've dealt with.
Sure. No, absolutely. When it comes to discrimination, and have you seen it when it comes to tech and in our space and in this world? And what are some of the things that people can do to help the cause? What can they do, especially in the tech world, where as you said, there's a lot of introverts. There's a lot of people kind of behind closed doors. So how do we, promote the cause? How do we get out in front of it? What have you experienced?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. uh Man, let's just say that, um especially with tech, it is a culture of, it doesn't matter how good you dress, it doesn't matter if you can speak the language, it's how good, how well can you perform. But in order to get that opportunity, sometimes it's just the door will not open because you're not part of that clique. And in order to get that click, you have to have the door at least cracked. But they don't want to crack the door open because you don't know anyone. And you don't know anyone well enough. You might like, hey, I shook hands. But again, it's not like we do a lot of networking. So folks don't want to give special, and I will say, especially in in areas where they bring in a lot of contractors, to where they're like, hey, look, I'm just going to keep my head down, focused on what I need to do, and I'm not going to try to partner with anyone, especially when they're from a different country. They really don't care. So it just makes it hard to say, hey, look, like, I need some. Even when you want to ask for help, you don't know how to approach people, so it makes that much more difficult. uh, I think I would love to say that I would have enjoyed it if I would have stick with my coding background. But I just don't see it where um, many people of color, mainly Black men, had really been given a fair shot at um, any opportunity to, because you feel like, okay, can I have another person of color up in here, and it's just difficult. So I would, it was just hard in that regards, just because the door is not even cracked open for you, and there's really no one to talk to about it, because it's kind of like we have our own code of of how we gonna allow someone to come into the scene. And so that's the difficult part, is no one's saying we all kind of look the same, and it's like, cool, that's how we like it. um and my son, for example, he's blonde hair, blue eyes. He plays Dungeons and Dragons and has all his different type of cards. And I'm like, Matthew, hey, let me play. He's like, no, Dad, nah. It's like, and you can, of course, it's my kid, so he's not trying to let me in on the game. But it's kind of like, if you don't know anything about it, then back way up. Like, don't even bother me. I'm busy, right? And I think that's kind of like the mind that what happens in our room. We're like, nope, you don't know anything about it, and we're on our Slack, right? And it's like, don't do anything else to bother me. And so I think that's the part where, since it is a very monolithic and homogeneous white male, that doesn't seem to be a problem. And I get it, because you're getting stuff done, but then when it comes time for their problem solving, it's like, it's like, you want to say, hey, we need to get some fresh blood in here, but you're not part of the fresh blood. It's like, let's just get another person that looks like us in here. Maybe they might help solve the problem.
Sure. Yeah. No. And it's one of those things, and it's one of those things where I've talked to folks, and what you don't, when you don't know, you don't know. And I think there's been a lot of people that just haven't known and don't, or haven't kind of recognized that, hey, there are these things. And the first sign of someone trying to figure it out is saying, okay, I don't understand. Like, I'm I don't know what to do. When it comes to these issues, it's not a new subject, but it's one where people need to kind of open their eyes and say, this is a major issue going on, and it's time for it to stop, right? It's time for it to quit. What ways do you think let's look at it this way, amidst everything going on, what do you see positively happening? Do you see any change happening right now? Do you think that some of these things are kind of moving in the right direction? What's kind of your take on what's going on right now in the tech world?
It's mixed. I am an optimistic person, so I do believe it is good. But someone came to me a few weeks ago and said, hey, can you help our company hire someone of color? I'm like, in a few years, but not today, not in the Pacific Northwest. And so even when I started on this journey, two main things really happened to me to say I was going to focus in on what I'm doing today. But the first thing was, one of my instructor, he was like, hey, you probably want to go. And I didn't really think about it until later on, and I understood what he was saying. But he was like, there's a school for Black scholars that I think you'll have a much easier time. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm like, my family's here. I got my job here, blah, blah, blah. And then the second time was when, back then, we will, in order to get a job, you try to crack somebody's site, find back doors, and we were focused on banks. And so we found back doors, and when we found a back door, we sent the email and said, hey, we found this in your gateway and whatnot. And I was like, you go ahead and send that email. I'm not going to send that email, because that's going to be a different response.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Just because of the, obvious optics. So those two things have always stuck with me, of basically, is there a culture that we can accept this on a global, or are we acknowledging it? Yes, there's a culture. But if somebody reaches out to you, are you going to embrace them? I don't think we have those systems set up just yet, because we're still using the systems that have kept people oppressed, that have not reached out to HBCU, have not reached out into a urban community and say, hell, it doesn't even have to be urban. It can just, you can go north in Clark County, and they're not as well developed, or as say the eastern or a little bit more northern of the systems that we have. So, I mean, yeah, sure, because of the pandemic, almost every student has a some form of iPad or electronic device. But before the pandemic, that wasn't the case. So you hear the code, they might do a Khan Academy, but that's not what's being celebrated as a field to go into. It's more so if you can't do college, do trade. There is no like, hey, you can also do like a coding camp for 9 months, and guess what? You can be a front end developer. That's not being said. Nor is anyone saying, hey, come look at this. So that's, and I'll also say it doesn't have to be about developing, but if you also look at esports, that's also an area for opportunity because, you know, when you think about all the capital you need to have to get the right monitor, to have the right equipment, that's all things that most families can afford.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. When it comes to, you know, being able to change that, what steps, and I think that's one of the issues is that right now I don't think anybody, I think it's really come to light over the last 6 months, you know, 6 to 8 months. It's really come to light. People know that there's got to be change and know that something's got to happen. You're in education. You know, you've been in education a long time and you've worked in the nonprofit scene with troubled youth. You have, you know, worked in tech. So you have a really diverse background when it comes to working with people and systems and processes. Being able to see it from both sides, again, from the education side to the employment side to the nonprofits and everything in between. What do you find to be some steps that we can take even locally, you know, and it doesn't have to be just tech, you know, locally here in Clark County, you and I have talked about this before. This is our home. This is where we love. We want to make this, you know, and a lot of people on the call are from either, you know, Portland or, you know, Clark County. You know, so Portland and Clark County, what are steps that we all can take? What are some things that just day to day, you know, that we can do to start, you know, creating a better place for everybody else and for, you know, the future generations that are coming up? What do you suggest that, you know, people start doing?
I encourage everyone. I thought I heard my echo. I encourage everyone just to go outside your comfort zone and like for example, I go to the NHL every once in a while to say, okay, what's being said, and I, you know, especially with social media, Facebook in particular, they have an algorithm down for you, as you all know. So some, you know, it doesn't know which one should we give them conservative or should we give them liberal. I do my best to make sure to not have them know exactly which way I'm leaning because I'm an I to anyways. But when it comes down to the first things you can do is get uncomfortable. Oh, I can't think of the name of the movie with Michael B. Jordan and with Jamie Foxx. I can't think of the name of that movie, but I watched that when they first released it, and it was for free, and I was just shocked that in my lifetime this still was happening. I'm still learning of new things that are happening, but it's also because I'm asking and I'm seeking things that are outside my comfort zone. So one of the first things you can do is like, hey, do y'all know what HBCU are? Have anyone Googled HBCU? Locally speaking, have you gone to visit a school that would be considered a at-risk school, and what are some things that will look like when it comes to supporting it? Um, Here's where it's like I want to give something uncomfortable, but I don't want to. But here I'll do it. So
That's what we're here for.
Okay, so here's what I'll do. I would have you go to a site, and it doesn't have to be like a HBCU, but go to a Black site. Like find a Black business that supports Black people, that celebrate Black culture. And I say Black culture, not African culture, because Black culture focuses on America. The Black Americans that, like myself, don't have identity from the African continent. I don't know who my people were. Plus, I got Irish in me and Native American. But go to a Black site that celebrates Blackness, and then also go to a site that is like the Harvard, not the Harvard, the Howard Law of Black women. Um, and look at also the things that are oh, here's another way. If you like, I don't have no clue. From hair, look at all the options when you go into Target, Walmart. Look at all the options you have when you look at hair. I only have like maybe this much to choose from, and everyone else got like you got like 3-4 rows. And you might think that's insignificant, like that's not a big deal, but that just tells me I'm not welcome. At the job site, I would say ask the person the last time they went to ensure like your search had at least 4 Black folks or people of color or BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color enter the search. And are you only doing it on like Monster or those sort of places? Are you going to other places that would be considered if you're in Portland? I know like Jeff and that kind of Northeast Portland used to be the place, but have you not gone further to Gresham? Have you not have you rode the Max out there? Have you been out there past daylight? And I'm trying to give some very specific examples. And also I would encourage you to look at if you don't understand Breonna Taylor's the fight of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and all those reasons why justice is so key, rather than someone asking for revenge. Like we could say as a Black America be asking for revenge, and it's because where are our opportunities? So I would say I'm only saying that to like put you in the mind frame, because most of the time we don't see that that's a problem, but Breonna Taylor's murderers are getting away and we call it justice. And that's where, if that's justice for someone dying, how is there justice in employment? How is there justice in redlining for homie? Like, where's there justice? Where do I get an equal opportunity? So I'm trying to help Elise say, hey, look, hair, that's not equal. That's not fair. When it comes to clothes, I don't get a chance for that. When it comes to schooling, I don't get the same equal opportunities or the chances. And it's not about equality. It's about equity.
No. Yeah, tough stuff. And thank you so much for sharing all that. I mean, that's what we're here for, is, and it's one of those subjects when it comes down to it, it starts with the youth. It starts with, some folks, you're just not going to change their mind. You're not going to change the way they think or feel. That's just, you can educate them, and hopefully, they take that education with them. When it comes down to, starting the change, especially with the youth and, the younger generations, when we're speaking to our kids, when we're speaking to the youth, when we're out there in the public, because my kids, I mean, I've got 4 of them, and they're spread apart between 14 and 1 years old. So, I mean, this is something I want, I'm very passionate about teaching them how to, change the world. My 14-year-old is very, very into, everything going on right now. And, as a white male, almost 40, I don't have to have the same conversations as you do with your kids. My son is a 14-year-old white male, and he's going to one day be an adult white male. And that's a privilege thing that we're talking to him about, is the privilege that he's going to have just because he is going to be a white male. And so what conversation should we be having with our youth to help them understand the significance about what's going on, and how that plays a role in changing the future? Because it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen probably even it's slowly going to take change. But what it's going to take a lot of times is our younger generations to start changing and creating a new a way that we think. It's been years and years and years, decades and thousands of years of harm. So what do you suggest for, a lot of us that work with youth, that work with these, where work in situations where we can be advocates, and so what should we be doing? What do we do?
Yeah, let's start when it comes to books. There are a lot of books out there that are not sharing the whole history. Like, for example, with Vancouver, that, what about the history of Vancouver before Captain Vancouver came to Vancouver and colonized it, right? Not just him, but the folks that here. I think when it comes to books, there are books that talk about the color of skin, especially what they say by 2030, 2050, we will, like, over 50% of the world will be people of color. White would be the minority. When I took my kids to my childhood church in Northeast Portland, my 10-year-old son, he said, "Dad," and this is literally like 10 minutes of being there. He says, "Dad, where are all the white people?" And he was like, because his mom's right, and he was like, "Where are the white people?" Like, immediately he saw that there were no white people, and I think he felt a little bit uncomfortable. But it's just like when I had an experience with Red Robin. They did me wrong for my birthday, so I was like, I'm not going back here. So I started to support the businesses that supported me, and so I started going to them. I started to hear their story, and so I started to realize that I'm supporting big businesses. I'm supporting these big corporations, and I'm not going, nor am I showing my children that I'm not supporting these business owners and these business owners' families, their stories, and one of the most important things is their culture. And part of that culture is, which we can say, hey, look, there's fried chicken and say barbecue ribs, right? But what's the story behind that? Even say chitlins. Well, if you tell the story of that was the scraps that the slaves got, and now because, say, Portland, hipster Portland made it cool, fried chicken, but no. That came from the slave owner saying, "This is what you're the last of the last. These were crumbs, and we made it into something glamorous." So that goes back to Black culture. Which we talk about, you can say culture appropriation, but even with the TikTok, who I can't remember the girl's name, but she stole the dance, the Savage dance. She took it from, I think, got it from TikTok and put it on another platform, and she got all the way to the NBA Finals or NFL and got a chance to be around that. But the credit never went to the Black girl that choreographed. So when we talk about the origin of certain things, we fail to leave out who are the ones that created it. Or we say, oh, for example, with I would say going down south. Why is going down south such a big deal? And I'm sorry, my dad's from the South, and my dad has sharecropper roots. Why are so many Black people are from the South, or why do we call it? Why is the South a big deal? Well, we don't talk about that story. We don't talk about the Emmett Till. We don't talk about deaths. We don't talk about, and it's not just the hanging of Black men and women. We're hanging on white as well. We don't talk about the Jewish experience. And so I think for children, it's there's a movie called The Hate U Give. And it was a really good movie that my kids watched it several times, and it's sad. But The Hate U Give was one of the movies that it could relate to kids to help them understand. And I even showed them Amistad. But it's too much. It was at the time too much for the little brains to handle, just because at the current day, when I did show them, it was before all this, it was like, oh no, that's not the way we live our life. But now they're seeing it and they're trying to connect, and they're trying to see, is this white person for me, or this white person going against me? Oh, how come we don't have Black teachers? How come we don't have Asian teachers? How come we don't have teachers from the Philippines? How come how come when I go to a person of authority, they don't look like me, they don't speak like me? Why is it that it doesn't seem to where when I go to, even when they come to college with me, how come I'm seeing all white people? And it's common, but when do we say like, no, this is not common? Especially when quick story, and I'll be done with this question. When I first started my company, I was driving for Uber for cash flow, and one of the things that someone asked me, and they're like, "Hey, I don't want to offend you or anything." And there's this kind of older, maybe couples in the 50s, and they said, "Where's all the black people at?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" They said, "Where's all the? We went to this part." They said, "We went to this part, the Pearl. We went to this part. Like, we don't know where are the black people at. Like, we watched Portlandia, and we can't find the black people." And I'm just like, "Oh, Portland is the whitest city in America, right?" But those are things that we don't want to say because it's common, it's the norm. And so when we tell our kids, like, "Hey, just so you know, this is not how things look." So, and it's important because when you go further out to some other areas, you might say, "Oh, I'm safe." But when they start making noises and calling you monkey, they call you the N word, you feel like, how I'm in the same, like the same white people. No, that's, you got to understand, like, that's the equivalent of stranger danger.
Yeah, no, powerful, real powerful stuff. Um, so what is it, what groups, locally, can people join? If we want to talk about being uncomfortable and making changes, it's, change doesn't happen if you are comfortable. It doesn't happen. Um, and so what are some things, even when it comes to hiring practices, and frankly, from a hiring standpoint, I've heard it, and I've heard it for years. So, oh, we need to hire a female, or we need to hire, who, it doesn't matter. But anything, I've heard literally people say we need to hire somebody other than white guys, and they're literally hiring just to fill that. Hey, to say, it happens with veterans, I've heard it happening with veterans. So it's like anyone that is other than the norm, you know and I've heard it multiple companies over and over again. I would be surprised if I hear it again, or that would be pretty gutsy. But the back end is, what do we do as people that do hire, that do bring folks on? How do we, change that system when it comes to hiring, in the way that we are screening folks and trying to change cultures? What are some things that you suggest, or, that you feel would be impactful to make sure that everybody does have the right opportunities and the same opportunities across the board?
First of all, it has to be part of the culture. One of the you might be able to get someone there, but allow them to. Here, let me put it this way: I don't want to have to code switch just so I can get my work done. I don't want to feel that I'm being a pest or a pain, and no one is looking to assist me. Or why do I always got to do the same happy hour? How come you're not asking me to go to my spots for happy hour? I think there's a culture that's been well established, and sometimes you don't think about that culture that has dominated, America for decades. And again, I will say, I'm speaking from my experience. I can't speak for all the Black people in the world. So one of the things you can do is just make sure when someone is onboarding is, one, do they feel comfortable to produce at a high level? If they don't feel comfortable to produce at a high level, more than likely they're just looking for ways to where they're not going to be discriminated against. You have microaggressions. I tell my kids, and I had to say this to my kid. I think I told him this about a month ago. I was like, "Oh shoot, I need to like line myself up," and he was like, you don't have hair. And I said, yes, I do. And he says, no, you don't have hair. I was like, no, don't say that. That's racist. And I had to make sure he understood that this is your one. I love my hair. I love how I look, right? But the other piece is then they were like, oh, see, you don't have any hair. I'm not a dog. I'm not a pet. And part of what folks have done in the job place is like pet me, like, oh, hey, what's going on? Like, no, don't, excuse you. I don't touch my head. Don't, that's not, mm-mm. And from that point on, we will never be cool, just to let you know, because you just treated me like I'm an animal. And I think that's where sometimes, like, and I get it, they mean no harm. And I know that that's not what their intention was, but they took my because what they do, because I need oil in my head and my scalp. What they do, they go like this, and then they go like, "Ew, what's that?" And I'm like, "Did I ask you to touch my head?" So this is a part where it's, well, then they feel uncomfortable. Well, you made me feel this way. It's like, hold on. So like, wait. So then from that point, it's like, man, I'm now looking for a new job. I don't even want to be here anymore. But from there, like, let's say if there's no opportunity for that person to advance, or because especially when they get older, or yeah, let's just say as they move on in their journey of their career, they want to look for ways to build relationships, one of the biggest things. But if they don't feel that openness, like, we don't get the social cues, we don't hang out or do any of that, then it gets really hard. And on top of that, our backgrounds from a lot of folks are just so different. But sometimes it's, we're scared to say something. As for hiring, I was on one hiring committee, and the guy, he wasn't from the States. English was a second language, and he gave some really dynamic answers, and but they weren't answers that they're, traditionally speaking, we would not have accepted, because there were other candidates that gave some very powerful, like, oh, this is what we look for in a candidate. But I'm like, that's well rehearsed and that's scripted. That's a boilerplate answer. But when we are saying, how do you work with diverse folks? We're looking for something that makes us feel comfortable, but we're not asking for people. Did they break barriers, especially systematic barriers? Did they create an environment and an ecosystem that was complementary to that system, or did they now improve it? So I think sometimes we want it to fit, but traditionally speaking, the things that we have implemented have not fit, have not worked. Even like, say, Nike, or even these companies that are a little bit further on, they still haven't done a great job representing people of color and women. And when you say women, there's also women of color. And so I think for the most part, the LGBTQ community has been like the diversity hire, for like we might not have a person of color, but we have someone who's part of the LGBTQIA community, and like it fits that. But then when that happens, it's just like, oh, you just want me here for the diversity hire to fill a quota, but you don't really want what I have to offer. And so every time you sit at the table, you're not really invited. There was one job in particular, when my boss came to me and said, like, how come you're still here? They're out at a happy hour. I was like, I wasn't invited. Like, why wouldn't they invite you? You're like, and I said, I keep telling you, those folks are racist. And they were like, no, you're a good guy. But I think for the most people, like here on this call, you want to understand racism, but it's not about trying to understand racism. People are just bigoted, and we have our biases. And some people, and what I learned in the Marine Corps was, someone told me when they were a kid, they had property and they had Mexicans work for them. He just said that he always learned that Mexicans were dirty, they were lazy, they would only do what you would tell them to do. And so he never saw them as equally. And it's funny, he was a tall, like white, blonde hair, blue eye, and he had a Mexican roommate, and he had his hair slicked back. He had the net on, do-rag, and he totally embraced the culture. He started eating the food and everything because he just didn't, he thought they were less than, and I don't, he was like, man, and he was like telling everybody because he didn't understand that he had those biases that he didn't get out, and so he was telling everybody that he could that he was no longer like that. So I think when you talking about hiring, you have to look at the established policies and the practices and say, these are the last, say, 10 hires. Where did you get them from? And you kind of do that analysis and say, okay, for the next 10 ones, you know, can we not do the same thing we've done before? And you're going to see a lot of pushback, and then people not giving 100%. And it's because they don't want different, they don't want change. But that's what you ultimately have to do.
Yeah, it's big. It's absolutely a big smoke screen. People talk the word, but they don't actually execute and really want it. So I feel you, and it's really tough. And I think it was yesterday. I don't remember where on LinkedIn, but there was a gal that posted. Somebody may have seen it on the call. I know a handful of us are LinkedIn people. Basically, it said stop hiring people of color as chief equity officers.
Oh God.
Yeah, it said stop hiring them as chief equity officers and put them at the executive C-suite level. Like that's almost like a, you know, like great, be a, you know, it's great to have a title, but give an executive C-suite executive title. Make them a CEO, make them a CFO, you know, make them president. Don't slap this brand new title on and think it's okay. You know, and so I mean, I feel like these companies, some of these big companies are sitting there saying, hey, but we did this thing, we have a title now, you know. And it just I hate to come across angry right now, but I got angered. I was like, that's just a slap in the face. That isn't changing anything. You're trying to cover up a huge mess that's happened for years by a title of chief equity officer. Great, make him a CEO, you know. And I didn't think about it until this person kind of said it, you know, said it. And it was, there's so much more that can be done than just this title that they just came up saying, okay, so then basically in the article they're talking about it, they're like, okay, if you're a person of color, you know, you're going to be, you know, this is all you've got. Like, you're going to be this chief equity officer because you're the only person of color in the thing. So that's going to be your job now. It doesn't work that way. It needs to be more. There needs to be more.
I think, and I see Julia's question about Candace Owens. People, I would say older folks that didn't grow up that way. And I would say I was in a relationship and their grandmother said, you know, well, you know, we don't want to make him feel uncomfortable because he's a Negro. We want to make, you know, so it's like the language. And I think for like the blackout, I haven't read it, Kim, but I think people are really comfortable with making, like, saying like, this is our, pretty much our token. And we want to embrace him and keep him and say, look, I got a black friend. I'm good. I don't need anyone else. So the Candace Owens, I try to give her a chance and I couldn't do it. But I think like you were saying, Max, people want to say that's our token. We trust that token. We're not going to listen to anyone else. But it has shown that those chief equity officers have not been, there's no history of them moving up the rank to anything more.
Exactly. And that's what this article ended up saying, is like, okay, great, that may be a first step. It's not like, I'm not saying that position's a bad position. It should have been done a long, long time ago. But what's next? What's next? You know, there's got to be more. And that starts from, you know, and it's, you know, it's got to start from the bottom all the way up. You know, you've got to bring more people of color within the industry in order to have positions. So, you know, we just need to, you know, bring it up. So, we've got about 10 minutes left. And I mean, you and I, you know, we can talk for hours. And so I want to give some folks, you know, time for questions and ask Nathan, you know, some things that you want, you know, and so who's got some questions? Who's wanting to speak up on some of these things? Okay, David.
Hey, Max. Thank you, Nathan, for your presentation. I really appreciate it. But this is really a complex thing, and it's unfortunate you have only an hour to talk about it. because this is something we could talk about for weeks, months, even years. It's a real complicated thing, and everybody has their own story. I think part of it is, people that are biased against you or racist against you. You need to call it out and hold those people accountable. I had and for myself, I'm sort of all about that. So I'm not afraid to say I had a bad encounter someplace, like at Winco. I remember that one time I had this, and this is sort of typical with me. I have a Caucasian wife. So when we go around town, people don't acknowledge us as a couple, sometimes in overt ways and covert ways. And you probably have had this experience too. But with Asians, I found in talking to other Asians is if I walk side by side with my wife up to a counter, they'll immediately go to my wife and ask, well, what would you like to order? Thinking that I don't have any language skills or I can't speak for myself. So it happens a lot overtly and covertly. And I think the thing is for businesses, if they want to hire good people and diversity is good for business, right? I mean, you get better ideas, businesses operate better, their bottom lines increase. I mean, one of the things, sure, you can have applications where people don't mention their racial profile, cultural ethnicity profile, that's fine. But once you get into an interview, you're there in their face. So that's another component that has to be dealt with as well, because I've had racial bias in interviews as well. Now, people sort of pigeonhole me because they think because I'm of a certain culture, I'm good at this particular thing, but I'm not really good at this other thing, which is totally wrong. And it's hard to keep businesses accountable for that because part of it is it's an evaluation issue. How are you going to evaluate that at a company level? Public sector jobs are actually pretty good because government has sort of like ingrown surveillance systems. And part of it is by law, state government, local governments, where they actually will take a census and say, well, your diversity is basically this. Part of the problem is sometimes those managers and bosses that have to do those surveys have to identify team members that are of a cultural minority. And that's a problem in itself because sometimes, are you going to go up to your employee and say, hey, basically, what race and culture are you? I mean, that can come across as kind of not really good. So there's a problem with that too. But basically, part of it is evaluation and knowing what the problem is and calling it out. I think one of the things that's starting to happen, at least with some of the larger companies, I don't think it's hit the Northwest too much. I think it's hit New York, Los Angeles, some of the other larger Austin, Texas has this too, actually, which is interesting, is if you're not hiring a workforce or a team that reflects the available diversity of talent that's out there nationally or regionally, then you're not doing a good job of diversifying and bringing in people into your workforce that represents that available talent pool. And part of this is a math thing, but at some point there's got to be a baseline. I mean, if you've got, I think right now it's 25% of the international workers are tech workers from India, and in your workforce, if you're a tech shop, a high-tech shop or a IT shop or an IS shop or whatever you want to call yourself, if you don't have that level of variety and diversity on hitting the mark, there's something wrong with your hiring practices.
Well, I think the part of it is understanding too, and you have to call it, like you just said, David, you got to call it out, which is so important.
Yeah.
But call out first and foremost that so I saw the affirmative action, and we talk about all the affirmative action, right?
Well, hold on. Affirmative action is sorry to jump in, but folks also have to remember affirmative action is a tool, but it's not a real good tool because affirmative action historically has benefited one group and one group only, really, and that's white women.
Right, and that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That needs to first be said that that was a rule that was established for all, but then people don't want to come out, in particular white women, to say we were the beneficiaries of this. When do we start acknowledging that people of color, and when we say people of color, we got to be very specific, which is why there's that term BIPOC, Black and Indigenous, because Black and Indigenous have been left out because people of color typically are the ones that they want to fly over on with visas to say, no, we are diverse. But that's the problem. And I would encourage anyone to say, to go to the HR department to say, why aren't we more diverse, as in having more Black, Indigenous, and people of color here? And take it to the next level, how are we then helping our K through 12 systems go beyond just the third grade reading level? And then on top of that, how can we ensure that we stop criminalizing, to continue to criminalize the folks that have been in the system and not truly give them a second chance? Because it's a vicious cycle to where people that are innocent have been incarcerated, or you can say, hey, they made a mistake, but then when they come out, they can't get a second chance for housing, even voting.
There's a whole history. There's a whole history, that right after the Civil War, criminalizing people that are Black.
No,
and we live with that history today.
Yeah,
it's outrageous.
One thing I wanted to do is answer some of these questions and that we have in the chat, as well as make sure that we stick to when people can. I know it gets late. So yeah, great stuff on here. On Nathan Travis asked the question, for job applications, putting in your ethnicity is often optional, and though they state that they don't base their decision off the answer, would you choose to opt out of answering? And do you think that everyone should opt out to make it more fair?
No, that's. I think in a perfect world, I would love not have to declare my race. Again, the last thing I would ever want to advantage or call someone out because of my race, because I believe I'm just as good. In a perfect world, no, we shouldn't. But in this world, it is, because how else will you know, unfortunately, that you are checking that box, making sure that people are of a BIPOC.
Sure. Yeah. And that it's a lot of things that we're dealing with. Any other questions? It's 6:58.
And I say with Kim, she said, because she leaves that with the skills and background. I'm very fortunate. My name is common, but my sister's name's not. My brother's name was not. So, like, my name, Nathan A. Webster, is English name. But typically Black people do not have, or Indigenous do not have that. So immediately, just like before, like when you compare men and women, their studies or their work, the men always come up at top until you remove the name, and their work became to rise to the top. So I think it's just, we as people, we're biased. We all have our bias, and that goes to our hunting, gathering, caveman, instinctual, fillers, or whatever you want to call it. So I just want to say, Kim, yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's authentically, I love when people say, hey, which is why we love sports, may the best person team win, but fortunately it's not a perfect world.
Yeah, no, good stuff. So I will wrap some of this up. I will stay on if people do want to stay on, talk a little bit. And please reach out to Nathan first and foremost on LinkedIn. Has some great content on there. He also has a podcast that is phenomenal. Always has really great guests there. So thank you, Nathan, for coming on. And some of the topics, as you said, when I texted you about this and coming on, it was some tough conversations. I don't know if everybody was rubbed the right way, but it's hard. These topics are hard. But hard conversations have to happen in order to make change. That is And you know, who better to make change than people that are passionate about change, right? We've got to change. And so I again want to thank you so much, Juan, for being my friend first and foremost. Just to let everyone know, Nathan was there when I got laid off, and if anybody watched my vlog, Nathan's the one who told me to do it. And he was like, "Hey man, you should do this. You got some stuff." So, you know, he helped me a lot during my unemployment journey, and just has been a friend to reach out to when there's tough things going on. So, thanks for all of that. Like I said, go reach out to him on LinkedIn. If we're not connected, feel free to reach out to me. But Get Hired Cascade Talks, like I said, we're going to be doing this now just once a month on Mondays, and until COVID stuff kind of settles, I thought we were going to get to move forward a little bit and do some virtual stuff, but with the phases getting pushed back and all these things, it's just not smart yet. So we'll see what happens. Going to play by ear for the rest of this year for sure. 2021, I'd like to say that we're going to be back in a space, a meeting space someday. I just don't see that happening probably for quite some time. So anyways, thanks also to Joe Dunn for helping promote this. He runs if you're a veteran and you haven't joined the PDX Veterans and Technology group, please go do that. So thank you, Joe, for coming by and running that group. So with that said, if people do want to stay for a minute, please, you know, just let me know if you want to talk for a minute. I've got a few more minutes, and then I've got a little boy to. It's my night for shower night with the boy, so that happens in about 5 minutes. But I've got some time if people want to talk and kind of communicate for a little bit. So, any additional questions for Nathan before we sign off?
Well, I just say if people. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say to Travis, just. It's a journey. Like, no one's perfect.
All right. Well,
I'm sorry, Kevin.
No, the same thing.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys very much. And guys, gals, I don't want to leave Kim out, and does anyone else that's out there.
I was like, was I with the only woman that joined? I wasn't.
No, there's a couple out. Yeah, there's a few. So, thanks for joining. I know Joy was on and she had to get off, but so yeah, thanks everybody again for coming. And if you want to hear about any of these topics, like I said, and anything in the future, Nathan's got a bunch of resources. What was that movie again that you had your kids watch? I think that was important to take note of.
The Hate You Give.
The Hate You Give.
I
think
Michael B. Jordan was at Just Mercy, I think was the movie you're talking about. Yep, there you go.
All right, thanks, Kevin. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be signing off. Look forward to seeing everybody on the next one. And if you have any speakers that you would like to hear or topics that you want to be discussed within this group, tough or not, we're open. We're opening it up. We're tackling the tough topics, and that's what we're going to do from this point forward. None of this kind of light stuff. We're going to handle these big issues, and people don't like it. Well, that's tough. It's my group. I'm doing it. So that's what we're doing. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.